Welcome to In the Studio, with a 21st century perspective on history's greatest rock albums.
You're welcome. Guitar up. 1, 2, 3.
I'm Redbeard, and today in the studio, it's the history of the English folk rocker who uniquely set world history to music.
The wind whips up, the waves aloud. The ghost moon sails among the clouds, turns the rifles into silver on the border. On the border. On the border. Of the cat.
Like the title after a while drove me crazy. I kept trying to call it different things, but every time I did, people would say, no, I really like it. It should be called Year of the Cat.
Year of the Cat.
This is Al Stewart in the studio for the Year of the Cat.
Oh, time passages. Buy me a ticket on the last train home tonight.
For years, it seemed as if Alastair Ian Stewart was on the way to carving out a unique, if somewhat obscure, place in the history of popular music. He was an English folk singer with a fondness for lyrics based on historical events. Songs about the predictions of Nostradamus, the German invasion of Russia, songs about shipwrecks and civil wars. Although they drew the occasional admiration of critics and college professors, they didn't seem likely to make Al Stewart a star. The Year of the Cat, released in September 1976, it changed all that. The album, and particularly the title song, were gigantic hits. The album made it into the top 5, and it stayed on the charts for nearly 8 consecutive months. It's hard to say why Year of the Cat was so much more successful than Al Stewart's 6 previous albums. That's right, 6. Maybe it was because the lyrics managed to combine just the right mix of romance and intellectualism. Maybe it was because the music and the images fit so well together. And maybe it was because pop music was simply ready for a gentler voice, ready for songs that had depth and a touch of mystery. Whatever it was, Al Stewart had come up with a sound and a style that was distinctly his own. Born in Glasgow, Scotland, in the final days of the Second World War, like Roger Waters' father, Al's dad died as an RAF pilot before Stewart was even born. With his widowed mother, they moved to Bournemouth in southern England, where at the age of 17, Al Stewart got a guitar and wanted to be a rock and roller. He even had what David Letterman would call a brush with greatness.
England, every third kid in England played the guitar and was in a beat group. We called them beat groups in those days. I got my guitar, and I was 17, and we did some crazy things. I got backstage to meet the Beatles. A friend of mine and myself, we went to the manager's office after a Beatle concert and said there were 1,000 kids, like around the stage door. And this is 63. And we said, I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Watkins, or whatever. He said, but we've come all the way from London, and we represent Rickenbacker Guitars, and Mr. Lennon has a contract with us, and we need to discuss some final details with him, but we can't get through because there seem to be all these screaming kids outside the stage door. Do you think you could move them for us? Now, the fact is, we're exactly the same age as all the... It was my friend who was saying all this. I was convinced we were going to get killed. I'm backing towards the door at this point. I think we're going to be thrown in the street. But the guy was so frazzled that he picked up the telephone. There's a police cordon there. He says, there's a Mr. Creamer and a Mr. Stewart on their way to the backstage door. Can you make sure they get in? So, to my astonishment, it's one of the great moments in my life. I find myself walking through a police cordon. They're holding back people that I've gone to school with who are staring at me in total astonishment, while I parade with this mad friend of mine backstage. And so all of a sudden we're backstage. But that's where the troubles began, because we got all the way to the Beatles' dressing room, and then we were met by Neil Aspinall, who I guess was their roadie in those days, their tour manager. And he knows a Rickenbacker representative when he sees one, and we were obviously not in that category. So he said, you two, out, and pointed. And I was about to leave. I swear I was about to leave when the door opened, and out stepped John Lennon. And I had to think, really. I was like thinking on your feet, really split second, and I had to come up with something that would allow me to stay. So I said, as one musician to another, why are you using these dreadful Vox amps? Your old Fender amps used to sound a lot better. And that was just straight off the top of my head. I'd never seen them playing through Fender amps, but I remember that they used to have them before they signed the contract with Vox. So Lennon looks at Aspinall and says, oh, it's okay, I'll talk to them, and proceeded to talk to us for 5 minutes. And that old black Rickenbacker that he played, in all those films, he went into the dressing room, got it out, and handed it to me. Now I'm terrified. I'm going to drop John Lennon's Rickenbacker. And I'm holding this thing. And part of my mind is saying, don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it. And he was just really charming. And he says, yeah, well, he said, I don't like Vox amps anyway. If I had my way, I'd kick it off the end of the pier and go back to my Fender. But Brian made us sign the contract, So anyway,
that's a great story.
No, but it gets better. That's not the end of it. This is the last thing I said to Lennon, because they were doing 2 shows, right? And we'd seen the first show, and then we got backstage, and they were about to do the second show. So my last comment was, he said, what do you think of the show? And I said, well, it was fine, but we couldn't hear you, because George and Paul are playing a lot louder, and so we can't hear it. We couldn't really hear you very well. And I go home, and I don't think any more about it. And the next day I wake up, and there's a newspaper in it, and it's a Bournemouth Echo review of the Beatles, right? And it said the first show was very, very good, but for some unknown reason, John Lennon played so loud in the second show that that we couldn't hear anything. So I had this little tiny claim to immortality in that I wrecked a Beatle concert in 1963.
Sometimes it seems unimaginable that you were ever any other way. With your white rose face and your open clothes, embroidered jeans and silver chains. You're a well-known face in all the hangout places where the lost souls congregate. You sit all night, but you talk too fast. I don't know what you're trying to say. Oh, Carol, I think it's time for running for cover. Believe me, you're everyone's and nobody's lover. You got a one-way ticket for all your yesterdays. I know your daddy said he talked to you, but he never really found the time. And your TV mother with the cocktail eyes could never really reach your mind. So you fixed your star to a passing dream and took a cocaine holiday. Now the years flow around you in a muddy stream. You need another place to stay. Oh, Carol, I think it's time for running for cover. Believe me, you're everyone's and nobody's lover. You got a one-way ticket for all your yesterdays. Reach down, silvery ship from the stars, and know you're there. I know you'll understand me. You can take me anywhere. I know you must be there. Well, sometimes it seems impossible that the game could get that rough. But the stage is set, the exit's barred, and the makeup won't come off. So you make your bow to the balcony. You light another cigarette, and the lights grow dim as the music starts, and it's easy to forget. Oh, Carol, I think it's time for running for cover. Believe me, you're everyone's and nobody's lover. You got a one-way ticket to all your yesterdays. Reach down, silvery ship from the stars, and know you're there. I know you'll understand me. You can take me anywhere. I know you must be there.
Al Stewart's Carol was a mid-chart hit in 1975 from the album Modern Times. But the first time most Americans first heard Al Stewart was on the preceding album. It's called Past, Present, and Future, and the achingly poignant first-person account of a young Russian soldier defending his country from Hitler's Nazi Tiger tank invasion during World War II in the song Roads to Moscow. Here's Al Stewart in the studio.
I had a moment of truth the first time I saw Jimi Hendrix, because I still was toying with the idea of playing the guitar. And in 1967, there was a place in London called the Savile Theatre, which is it was the hit place. Actually, Brian Epstein owned it. Hendrix did 3 concerts there in 67 when he was first starting, and I saw all of them. And I mean, after one, that was enough. I knew that if I lived to be 5,000 years old, I could never play the guitar like that. So I said, "You're fooling yourself, that you are not cut out to be the lead guitar player of a rock band," much though I would have loved it. So I went home and I had a little talk with myself. And I think one of the great things that you have to do as an artist in any field, writing, painting, singing, whatever, is basically to sort out what your weaknesses and your strengths are. And I thought, well, I can't really sing. I've got a range of about 10 notes. It's true, I can't. I sing everything in sort of like in the mid-range. I can't really play the guitar very well. Like if I worked for 15 years, I might have got up to kind of Spinal Tap level. So what can I do? And I said, well, what I've always been able to do since I was a kid is rhyme almost anything. I mean, nobody can rhyme orange and desert, even though I've tried. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to be a rhymer. So I got into writing lyrics, and from there, because I happened to be reading French existentialism at the time, it was a logical hop into history. And at some point along the line, I began writing historical folk rock songs. Dylan was definitely a very big part. I listened to Dylan. I grew up in Bournemouth, this little sort of sleepy seaside town, and we were so unaware that when his first record came out, the girl in the record store told us that his name was Bob Dylan. We couldn't even pronounce him right. Well, I bought it anyway. It had House of the Rising Sun on it, and it had Baby Let Me Follow You Down with a wonderful introduction about Rick Von Schmidt. I first heard this song from Rick Von Schmidt. He's a blues singer in the green fields of Cambridge. I'm doing this from memory. I probably haven't heard that for 20 years. The Animals covered both of them and they became hits, so it's obvious that Bob Dylan or whoever he was a person I ought to know about. Then of course, The Freewheeling came out, floored me. But the one that completely knocked me through the roof was The Times They Are Changing. And when that came out, I was just converted. I'd been playing Walk in the Dog or something every night, sort of in R&B bands, and I thought, wow, I mean, come on, and own up. I mean, this stuff is just incredible. This is like another planet, lyrically. And it took the edge off She Loves You, yeah for me. I mean, I still like popular music. I've always liked it. And I like Surfing Bird by the Trashmen. I mean, there's a part of me that likes basic, sort of Ramones grunge rock stuff. If I'm in a certain mood, that's what I will play. Dylan came along, and then I moved up to London, and by sheer coincidence and probably very good fortune, found myself living next door to Paul Simon in the same apartment. So it was interesting being around that kind of thing. I guess listening to the Beatles and meeting them, however vicariously, and then watching Paul write songs at close hand and listening to Dylan, all of those must have been, very formative influences on a 19-year-old Al Stewart. Well, I'm not a great believer in formal education, at least not in my case, because it didn't work. I actually failed history at the most basic level. I did at school. In fact, I never read anything at school. I mean, I basically rebelled and played the guitar all day. I mean, I didn't show up. I was at boarding school, so I had to show up most of the time, but eventually I rebelled and went on strike, and I got thrown out of the school. I have that in common with Winston Churchill. I mean, he had a similar experience, so I don't think this is necessarily bad. Barbara Tuchman is largely self-educated. People don't realize this. Some people just do not adapt very well to being told things. I can learn things, but I don't like being told them. Roads to Moscow took me 4 years to write. It was the most complicated song. I don't think I would ever put that much effort into a single song. I read between 40 and 50 books to write that single song. I began with Solzhenitsyn. It's loosely based on One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, although the first circle is a finer novel. And then for background, I read some Tchaikovskaya and some Arthur Koestler. And Then I decided I wanted an overview of the period, so I read William Shearer and Harrison Salisbury and St. Alexander Worth, I think it was, A History of Russia at War 41 to 45. Great book. Then I decided I wanted the actual nitty-gritty of the military campaigns. So I read Heinz Guderian's Panzerlieder, which is the classic study of tank warfare. And to get the other point of view, I read the memoirs of Marshal Zhukov, who was the defender of Moscow at the time. And I read some Manstein and the great military theoreticians and leaders of the day. And after about 4 years, I knew more about German tank tactics outside Tula than I sort of than almost anything else. And what emerged was the song Roads to Moscow. But the research was prodigious. It took a long time to do. I mean, some songs take me 5 minutes. This one took me 4 years, but most of it was research.
They crossed over the border the hour before dawn, moving in lines through the day. Most of our planes were destroyed on the ground where they lay, waiting for orders we held in the wood. Word from the front never came. By evening the sound of the gunfire was miles away. Softly we move through the shadow, slip away through the trees, crossing their lines in the mists in the fields, on our hands and our knees. I know that I ever was able to see the fire in the air, glowing red, silhouetting the smoke on the breeze. All summer they drove us back through the Ukraine. Smolensk and Vyazma soon fell. By autumn we stood with our backs to the town of Orel. Closer and closer to Moscow they come, riding the wind like a bell. General Guderian stands at the crest of the hill. Winter brought with her the rains, oceans of mud filled the roads, gluing the tracks of their tanks to the ground, while the sky filled with snow. I know that I ever was able to see the fire in the air, glowing red, silhouetting the snow on the breeze. In the footsteps of Napoleon, the shadow figures stagger through the winter, falling back before the gates of Moscow, standing in the wings like an avenger. And far away behind their lines, the partisans are stirring in the forest, coming unexpectedly upon their outposts, growing like a promise. You'll never know which way to turn, which way to look, you'll never see us. As we're stealing through the blackness of the night, you'll never hear us. And the evening sings in a voice of amber, the dawn is surely coming. The morning road leads to Stalingrad and the sky is softly humming. broken tigers on fire in the night flicker their souls to the wind. We wait in the lines for the final approach to begin. It's been almost 4 years that I've carried a gun. At home it'll almost be spring. The flames of the tigers are lighting the road to Berlin. Quickly we move through the ruins that bow to the ground. The old men and children they send out to face us, they can't slow us down. And now that I ever was able to see, the eyes of the city are opening now. It's the end of the dream. I'm coming home, now you can taste it in the wind, the war is over. And I listen to the clicking of the train wheels as we roll across the border. And now they ask me at the time that I was caught behind their lines and taken prisoner. They only held me for a day, a lucky break I say. They turn and listen closer. I'll never know why I was taken from the line and all the others to board a special train and journey deep into the heart of Holy Russia. And it's cold and damp in the transit camp and the air is still and sullen. And the pale sun of October whispers the snow will soon be coming. And I wonder when I'll be home again in the morning. Answers never. And the evening sighs in the steely Russian skies go on forever.
He had survived Russia's bitter winter cold and Hitler's Tiger tanks, and though held as a prisoner for only a single day, this young, brave Russian soldier, like all returning Russian POWs, would be killed by his own military when he got home. Unthinkable, but a true story. In Al Stewart's 1973 Roads to Moscow, from his fifth album, Past, Present, and Future. Up next, Al Stewart teams with an eager and talented young producer named Parsons to become one of the 70s most unlikely hitmakers. Follow In the Studio on Facebook, on Twitter at Redbeard Rocks, and online at inthestudio.net. I'm Redbeard. You're in the studio with the best of Al Stewart.
This is Al Stewart in the studio for the Year of the Cat.
Thanks, Al. I'm Redbeard, and it's important to realize just how bleak and discouraging Stewart's prospects were immediately prior to the sudden success. After all, Al Stewart had written and recorded 4 full-length albums in the UK, but none appeared in U.S. record stores. Here's Al Stewart with me in the studio.
I had entreated CBS Records, Columbia here, to put something of mine out so that I could at least come over and play a few folk clubs. And I had pleaded with them, I begged, I'd cajoled and done everything humanly possible. And finally, when I made Past, Present, and Future, I sent them over a collection of tracks. I think Roads to Moscow was amongst them, and Nostradamus. And I finally got this letter back saying, we have no interest in Al Stewart, either in the past, in the present, or in the future. And I said, well, so I went round to the English division, and I said, if this is truly the case, can you sign a piece of paper saying that I can take my record somewhere else? And they said, yeah, they don't seem to want you in New York, so best of luck finding another label. And I took that record to every major label in America, and every major label in America turned it down. And eventually I found a tiny record company called Janus on the West Coast that employed 10 people, one of whom was Alan Mason, who was basically a sort of record collector freak. He had 34,000 records in his little house in Santa Monica. He collected records and Marvel comics. And he was kind of thrilled by the idea that the cover art, featured Doctor Strange walking through a time warp or whatever. And I think largely based on that, he decided to put it out on Janus. And that's how I got my first American release.
Boats go out across the evening water, smuggling guns and arms across the Spanish border. The wind whips up, the waves are loud, the ghost moon sails among the clouds, turns the rifles into silver on the border. On my wall, the colors of the maps around me. From Africa, the winds, they talk of changes coming. The torches flare up in the night, the hand that sets the farms alight to spread the word to those who are waiting on the border. In the village where I grew up, nothing seems the same. Still, you never see the change from day to day. No one notices the customs slip away. Late last night the rain was knocking on my window. I moved across the darkened room and in the lamp glow I thought I saw down in the street the spirit of the century, telling us that we're all standing on the border. In the islands where I grew up, nothing seems the same. It's just the patterns that remain, an empty shell. But there's a strangeness in the air, you feel too well. Boats go out across the evening water, smuggling guns and arms across the Spanish border. The wind whips up, the waves are loud, the ghost moon sails among the clouds, turns the rifles into silver on the border. On the border. On the border. On the border.
From his 1976 album Year of the Cat, that's Al Stewart, On the Border, mysterious and unconventional. Sadly, the heightened awareness of terrorism in America post 9/11 is nothing new in many other parts of the world, according to Al Stewart.
On the Border is fascinating. The border, of course, is between France and Spain, but what most people don't... some people think it's about the Spanish Civil War, which it isn't. I was, in fact, writing about the Basque separatist movement, if you can believe that, because the Basques live, as do the Kurds, across borders. And in the case of the Basques, they're in southern France and northwestern Spain. And they've been trying to get their own state for as long as I can remember. I mean, periodically they blow up members of the Spanish government. It doesn't seem to do them any good. And I was eating in a Basque restaurant here. I'd just come to America, and I had a friend. He was a Basque, and he cooked these amazing dishes, and in the back of my mind, I guess I was thinking about Guernica, the Picasso painting, and somehow or other I decided that I would just write, not taking sides, but I would, sort of do the first verse on the Basque separatist movement. And if you remember the time frame, this was also the time that Rhodesia was coming to an end. and there was a crisis in Rhodesia. So the second verse is actually about the Rhodesian crisis, and the choruses are about the decline and fall of the British Empire. And the entire song was put into my mind by, of all people, Edward Heath, who was a British Prime Minister. He said, in the future, wars will not be fought between armies, they will be waged upon civilians. In other words, terrorism will become, wars will become internalized. And the line, "we're all standing on the border," is just that. It's basically what Edward Heath said back in those days.
The 1975 Al Stewart album Modern Times had been produced by an eager, talented young recording engineer, Alan Parsons, and they decided to team up again on the 1976 follow-up album entitled The Year of the Cat, the title song of which, heavy with iconic cinematic references, would change Al Stewart's life.
The Bogart, On a Morning from a Bogart movie. Peter Lorre gets in there as well. The Year of the Cat thing was the most difficult song to write because, really, just because of the title. I had this girlfriend, and she had a book on Vietnamese astrology, and I was walking around the room, and it was open at a chapter titled "The Year of the Cat," which I suppose is a Vietnamese astrological sign. It must be. And I didn't read the book, but I have a nose for song titles, you know what I mean? It's like I can spot them at 500 paces, downwind. And I said, that is a song title. Now, simultaneously, we had been on tour in America, opening for Linda Ronstadt. We went all over the South and some bits of the North, just opening for her during the Modern Times period. And Peter Wood kept playing this piano riff, and I remember it distinctly. We were in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we were doing a sound check, and I was standing by the side of the stage, and Peter had finally managed to get the rest of the band to learn the chords, and they were just playing this riff over and over again. And I was standing around waiting to go and do my vocal sound check, and I said, there's something really catchy about that. Would you mind if I wrote some words to it? He said, no, go ahead. I said, okay, write me out a chord chart. So I took it back to England after the Linda Ronstadt tour and tried to write this song. And then of course, I saw in my girlfriend's book, I saw I had the title and I had the riff. Well, I had nothing else. And it drove me crazy. I wrote an entire set of lyrics about a British comedian called Tony Hancock. And the song was, and I threw out Year of the Cat and called it Foot of the Stage. So it went, at the foot of the stage, da, 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 da. And I probably have those words somewhere still. And I played it to everyone, and everyone went, yeah, that's good. But I mean, it was, sort of what they were really doing, where they were all holding up placards saying like 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or whatever, So I thought, well, damn it, what can I write this thing about it? Because I'd finished the rest of the record, and I had no conception of what I would do lyrically with this. So I just went into this Casablanca thing, and I decided that 1975 was, that was the Year of the Cat in Vietnamese astrology, and I decided I would just send this person back to Casablanca in 1975 to kind of relive a love affair, much as, the love affair unveiled in the song. So I just stuck this person in, I stranded them in Casablanca in 1975 and wrote the song around that. It's like a contemporary love story, sort of an updating of the film. And so, but it really, that came out of desperation because I couldn't think of anything to write about with this wretched title. I mean, like the title after a while drove me crazy. I kept trying to call it different things, but every time I did, people would say, no, I really like it. It should be called Year of the Cat. I'd say, what am I going to write it about, Because I didn't want to be obvious and write about cats or something,
On a morning from a Bogart movie, in a country where they turn back time, you go strolling through the crowd like Peter Lorre contemplating a crime. She comes out of the sun in a silk dress, running like a watercolor in the rain. Don't bother asking for explanation, she'll just tell you that she came in the year of the cat. She doesn't give you time for questions as she locks up your arm in hers, and you follow till your sense of which direction completely disappears. By the blue tiled walls near the market stalls, there's a hidden door she leads you to. These days, she says, I feel my life just like a river running through the year of the cat. While she looks at you so coolly, and her eyes shine like the moon and the sea. She comes in incense and patchouli, so you take her to find what's waiting inside the year of the cat. One morning comes and you're still with her, and the bus and the tourists are gone, and you've thrown away your choice and lost your ticket, so you have to stay on. But the drumbeat strains of the night remain, and the rhythm of the newborn day. You know, sometime you're bound to leave her, but for now you're gonna stay in the year of the cat. The year of the cat.
Welcome back for the Year of the Cat. I'm Al Stewart, in the studio. The other thing which is funny about that particular song is that I had always hated brass instruments, and Alan Parsons was producing it. And we'd finished the whole thing with the vocal, and everything was in place except there was a space where there had to be a solo. Now, we already had a guitar solo. We had an acoustic guitar solo, we had an electric guitar solo, and we're sitting around and we're going, bagpipes? Nah. Flugelhorn? Nah. And Parsons said, what about saxophone? And I said, I hate saxophones. I was thinking like sort of, in my mind, I was hearing, sort of Tommy Dorsey or something. I was sort of, oh, Glenn Miller. I mean, I had totally missed the point. I said, I don't want saxophones on my record. What are you talking about? Like 1940s Frank Sinatra thing. And he said, no. He said, trust me, it'll sound good. He said, I know a guy just around the corner called Phil Kenzie, and I'll give him a call, and we'll just try it, and if you don't like it, we'll throw it off. So he called up Phil Kenzie, and Phil Kenzie was watching a movie. This is another true story, strange but true, from the file. And Kenzie didn't want to come out. And the movie, it was half an hour into the movie, and Alan said, well, it's only going to take you a minute. I mean, it's like one pass and you can go back and see the end of the movie. And so very reluctantly, Phil Kenzie came into the studio, making it fairly obvious that he didn't want to be bothered with this, but he was doing a favor to Alan. And he hauls out his saxophone, and I think in either one or two takes, played the solo, which is on the record, and then without batting an eyelid, went back and watched the end of his movie. So I still didn't like it, and I said, well, I don't think it works, but I'll sleep on it. And I woke up the next morning and I said, well, it doesn't sound that bad, And Alan was just really gung-ho. He said, oh, it sounds great. Trust me, by the time we've stuck some strings on it, it'll sound great. So it stayed on. Of course, ever since doing that, I've had to have a saxophone in my band everywhere I go. I'm now glued into the sort of wonderful world of saxophones. It got even worse because Jerry Rafferty, shortly after Year of the Cat, came out with Baker Street, which a lot of people think he got the idea of using saxes from me. And there was a rash of these things, and saxophones, all of a sudden, all those hit records from that period had saxophones on them. So I started putting saxophones on all my records, and it just got really silly for a while. But I really wanted nothing. I wanted no part of it at the time that I was recording it. It's just one of those vagaries of fate that caught up with me.
Changing the radio stations with my mind on you. All your friends call you Lily Paloma, but that's not the way that you are. It's too much of a gentle misnomer for a shooting star. But you and me, baby, I saw you there. Straight away I knew there's really no hiding. I tell you right now what we're gonna do. We'll go collecting the days, putting the moments away. You're on my mind like a song on the radio. You're on my mind like a song on the radio. I remember the first time I saw you, alone in the dark with a drink, with a candle flame burning before you, and your thoughts closed in. You were staring out into the distance, not seeming to hear what I said. Why did you put up such resistance, like all the lights were red? 'Cause you and me, baby, I saw you there. Straight away really no hiding. I tell you right now what we're gonna do. We'll go collecting the days, putting the moments away. You're on my mind like a song on the radio. You're on my mind like a song on the radio. Don't know what it was that was painful, but sometimes it's there in your face. There are times when you just look disdainful of the human race. Ah, but then on the wings of emotion, we circle each other in flight, till together we roll like the ocean in its bed at night. You and me, baby, I saw you there. Straight away I knew there's really no hiding. I tell you right now what we're gonna do. We'll go collecting the days, putting the moments away. You're on my mind like a song on the radio. You're on my mind like a song on the radio. Oh, oh, song on the radio. Oh, oh, song on the radio.
With hit albums like 1978's Time Passages containing the hit Song on the Radio, back-to-back with the multi-million sales of The Year of the Cat, Al Stewart became an unlikely mainstream hitmaker, about as far removed from his humble mid-60s London Soho coffee house roots as one could ever imagine.
It was because of, I think, of timing. We had come out, that was the mid-70s, and FM radio in the mid-70s was playing a softer kind of sound. I mean, like it had, there had been total anarchy in the 60s where they played whatever they liked. I mean, you could be listening to the Village Fugs or something, you know. It went through like the soft rock period. There was a lot of James Taylor and Joni Mitchell and stuff on the radio. Carole King, obviously. Simon Garfunkel. So by the time The Year of the Cat came out, it was right at the very, very end. I still think if that record had come out 2 years later, it wouldn't have made it. Because the radio immediately after Year of the Cat got a lot, just the sound became a lot sort of grungier and harder and tougher and more rocky. So that one just slipped under the wire, I think, realistically.
The sky turned to snow. All round the day was going down slow. Night like a river beginning to flow. I felt the beat of my mind go drifting into time passages. Yes, go falling in the fading light. Time passages. Buy me a ticket on the last train home tonight. Well, I'm not the kind to live in the past. The years run too short and the days too fast. The things you lean on are things that don't last. Well, it's just now and then my line gets cast into these time passages. There's something back there that you left behind. Oh, time passages. Buy me a ticket on the last train home tonight. Hear the echoes and feel yourself starting to turn. Don't know why you should feel that there's something to learn. It's just a game that you play. Well, the picture is changing now. You're part of a crowd. They're laughing at something and the music's loud. A girl comes towards you, you once used to know. You reach out your hand, but you're all alone in those time passages. I know you're in there, you're just out of sight. Oh, time passages. Buy me a ticket on the last train home tonight.
title song to Al Stewart's second multi-million seller album, 1978's Time Passages. This is Redbeard in the studio thanking Al Stewart for coming up from his wine cellar. In the Studio is written and produced by yours truly, Redbeard, for Bearded Fish Productions. Copyright 2013, all rights reserved. Transcription by Jane Carpenter Brunet. Theme song by Andy Timmons. Follow In the Studio on Facebook, at Redbeard Rocks on Twitter. And for the biggest names in rock, visit inthestudio.net.